What's up guys, and welcome to my Phainon teammate guide. There's a lot of people wondering on who they should properly use with Phainon because while he does have practically a lot of actual characters that do work with him, at the same time a lot of them will be better than others, so people are wondering what they should actually use. So in this video I do have 4 separate tiers on characters and where I do think they do go, when you are accounting for the 5 stars being around E0S0 or at least E0S1, just so you can get an idea of who is better to use than the latter. All these characters are still good with him, so just because you see someone in tier 4 doesn't mean they're completely unusable with them. They're on this list because they are usable, they're just not going to be as good as the others. I do want you to note though, this video is not going to be accounting for sustains, and is only going to be counting for the people in the role that mainly focus on amplifying his damage, so the harmony supports, the debuffers, and so on. And so this video is not going to be talking about sustains, especially ones who are better because they can target Phainon as opposed to not, since they have actual buffs in their kit and so on. It's only going to be talking about harmony buffers and also a singular debuffer. And with that being said, let's dive straight in. So just quickly for anyone that may not really know how Phainon does work, is Phainon has a unique ultimate similar to the ones like Acheron, Phainon, and so on. The way he gets it is by being a target of an ability, which can be through enemies or mainly your allies. He can also get 2 when using his skill. That's why characters that specifically target him, such as an action advanced character that only goes for 1 character, is going to be the better play, as it helps you get his ultimate quicker. Once you do find the ultimate with Phainon, he does go into this form where you do get a bunch of extra turns, and since they're not actually another turn, any character's buffs that are based off the person acting turn is still going to be able to help him retain his buff throughout the entire ultimate. And since you're also departing everyone on the team, meaning that they're not actually going to be there to help you attack, you're not going to need to reapply any buffs, they're just going to stay on him throughout that entire ultimate. This does hurt the synergy a bit when it comes to some debuffers, except for one that I'll mention, since the only people that are going to be able to act in that ultimate is going to be Phainon in his ultimate himself and then all the enemies. And since debuffs do expire on the enemy's turn, you won't really be able to reapply them, and with how Phainon's counter works where you do action advance the enemies on the field, you can expire it quickly. So that's why a lot of debuffers don't really work with him except one specifically. But that is a general gist that you do want to know about Phainon. He retains his buffs in his ultimate, even though he does depart everyone else, and he can only get ultimate charges by being a target of an ability or using his skill. Now getting into the actual teammates themselves, so we're going to start with tier 4, which is only going to have 1 character, and that is going to be Yukong. Yukong unfortunately does not actually target Phainon specifically, so she can't really give him any charges, and her ultimate is also an attack, but she is able to provide buffs that he is able to retain in his ultimate. Just because Phainon is a character that does get charges only from being the target abilities doesn't mean you have to run 3 characters that target him. Yes, that means he will get his ultimate the quickest, but it's also good to run some AoE buffers, because a lot of AoE buffers for Phainon specifically can be really good. So Yukong does work with him, because Yukong's problem was she has really bad uptime. Even though her buffs now are not really that great, her main problem was the fact that she did just have bad uptime. But since Phainon goes to his ultimate, you don't really have to recast these. So with her skill, she's going to be able to give everyone an 80% increase to attack, which is going to be good. Unfortunately, Phainon is also very saturated with buffs, so it's hard to make effective buffs, but it still does work. And once you do use Yukong's ultimate, you'll also be able to increase your allies' crit rate by 28% and crit damage by 65% while also dealing damage, as long as the skill buff is active. So that's going to also allow you to have a better crit ratio with your Phainon, as you're getting a big 28% increase to crit rate. That's a really good increase to crit rate. That's even higher than Sunday's talent, and is one of the only sources of crit rate you can get on him. Crit damage buff is also pretty nice as well, and with their E1 you're also going to be able to increase your allies' speed by 10% for 2 turns, which can help you hit further breakpoints on your other supports that are buffing Phainon, or if you're running a faster Phainon, then that can help him hit better breakpoints. So that E1 is also a little nice bonus. Moving on to tier 3, the first character is going to be Tribby. Tribby is also an AoE buffer, so you can't target Phainon specifically, unfortunately. Tribby does provide a less saturated buff on him, which is ulti-breast pen with this skill, so that's also nice. And in her ultimate, she activates a zone where enemies will take more damage, and also allows additional quantum damage dealt based off her max HP, which still does actually apply in his ultimate. Unfortunately, you do lose out on access on the extra follow-up attacks Tribby does have, as she's not going to be there to actually use it. But at least the zone that makes enemies take more damage, which is going to be lesser had on Phainon's teams, and also help you with a little more damage with the additional quantum damage is going to be nice. Unfortunately, that's where the buffs do end. It's just the fact that she has better niche buffs, which is why she is a tier higher. She would jump tiers if this did count for her E1, but I'm not including her E1. As again, I mentioned this is mainly E0 and E0S1. If you were to factor in E1, she can probably go up to tier 2 or maybe even tier 1 because of how big that true damage is going to do. Again, her niche buffs plus that true damage plus Phainon already doing a bunch of damage with that true damage is going to make them do significantly more. But as this video is only counting for E0S1, at the minimum, it's only really going to be in tier 3. Next up, we do have Ruanmei, which her skill will provide weakness break efficiency and also increase damage for your allies. In her ultimate zone, she will be able to increase everyone's all-type res pen. And you can also have rebreak where enemies maybe attack you less, but that can also get a bit annoying in Phainon's ult, especially when you're doing the counter, because you can make them end up acting while they're broken, and then they get re-broken with Ruanmei's zone active. And that could mean less stacks you could get for your counter damage, but that's really the only annoyance you would have. She also does increase speed by being on the team, which again would mainly be something that would help you outside the battle for your other supports or Phainon if you're building him fast himself. As unfortunately, his extra turns scale off Phainon's base speed only, so percentage speed buffs do not actually help him when it comes to getting his extra turns quicker. So again, that's mainly something to help him out of battle. Ruanmei would also jump a tier if you did end up having E1 because it does provide defense ignore, which is going to be really good for Phainon, as it's going to be the one effect he doesn't really have. But for E0 S0, she would go into tier 3 alongside Tribi. Now for tier 2, I want to talk about Sparkle. Sparkle only really works if you are building Phainon at base speed with attack percent boots, which most people will be doing anyways. Her buff is going to amplify a bunch of his crit damage, which is a bit less desired since he does give himself crit damage as well. Her also being able to recover skill points is going to allow you to freely spam any skill you are using outside of battle, so maybe in a case where you're spamming too many skills with other characters, you could end up running out of skill points, but Sparkle will make sure you don't end up having that issue. Sparkle can also provide a bit of damage dealt, while also increasing the team's attack percent a little bit. Her skill also is going to be the first targeting skill I do mention on this list, so Sparkle is actually going to be able to charge up Phainon as well. And since Sparkle is often built at hyperspeed or even crazy thresholds with DDD setups and such, she's going to act quite frequently, so you are able to get even more turns for your Phainon, allowing you to ult as quickly as possible and do your attacks. The other character is going to be Robin. Robin's skill is just a free 50% damage dealt, and she also will just give free 20% crit damage for everyone on the team. And in her ultimate, she's going to be able to increase Phainon's attack by a lot. She also can unfortunately not target Phainon himself, but the reason she is higher than the other ones is the fact that she gives everyone a turn. Action advancing your entire team and allowing them to act again is going to let Phainon get more attacks and also let your supports to give Phainon more turns get more attacks as well. And by attacks, I mean a skill that would actually advance them. So they can target him, you can get more ults than you normally would. So you can have her pop her skill, you'd have maybe action advance support 1, give him a skill buff, and then he uses his skill. Then you'd have another one do the same thing, and then you'd go again. Depending if you have Robin ult, which usually you would by then, you would Robin ult and you're able to do it again and get his ultimate even quicker than you normally would. Robin is extremely good at the fact that she does just give everyone another turn, and her buffs are also very, very nice. And now we move on to tier 1, the best characters you can overall use with Phainon. Starting it off with the best, and that is Sunday. Sunday is overall the best character you can use with him, as he is one of the 2 characters that can provide a full turn with the skill that does target him. On the plus side, Sunday's ultimate is also a single target buff, so you can give Phainon a charge from Sunday's skill, you can give him a charge from Sunday's ultimate, and Sunday's ultimate does regenerate energy, which will proc one of Phainon's major traces to give him an additional charge. So no one could give him charges as fast as Sunday can, especially when you are factoring in when Sunday gives Phainon another turn on top of all the things that I did mention for Phainon to use a skill and gain an additional 2 stacks. Sunday's buffs for him are also great: damage dealt, crit damage, the extra energy for 1 extra charge, and also 20% crit rate, which will allow you on your Phainon to allocate more attack percent and crit damage. On top of that, Sunday's technique will allow Sunday to give an additional 50% damage dealt for 2 turns when using the skill first for the next battle, so that buff will also be retained for Phainon in his first ultimate. And the character behind him is going to be Bronya. Bronya also does give a full turn with a technically higher skill damage increase, not for the first time thanks to Sunday's technique, but overall her skill does provide a bit more of a damage increase. Her ultimate is going to be an AoE buff, so it's not going to target Phainon specifically and also doesn't give energy, but it will increase the attack percent of all your allies and also their crit damage. So you can provide Phainon with buffs. She works really good with Sunday and also as a Sunday replacement. Ideally, you have her plus Sunday. That's going to be one of the best cases you can have. So again, Sunday is going to be the better Bronya, but Bronya is usually the best next option you would use, or at least someone you would use alongside Sunday, as again, she gives a full turn. Her buffs are relatively similar, a bit worse, but relatively similar, and that is why she does work well. Another character that does work really well is going to be Phainon. Phainon also is the other character that's going to give as many stacks as Sunday, technically a little less because she doesn't give an action advance. But Phainon's skill is going to target Phainon and increase his attack. Phainon ultimate will also target Phainon specifically to give him another charge, which will also increase his damage. And it also does regenerate energy, so you will be able to give another charge. So just like Sunday, you're going to be giving up to 3. You can skill and then ult, and that's going to be 3 charges since that's 2 targets plus energy. Again, Sunday technically gives 5 because he allows Phainon to skill. But when it comes to pure kit-wise, giving the buffs and the also charges, that is why she's going to be better at charging it compared to others. Phainon also holds DDD really well. She's usually built really fast. So you're able to do a lot of setups outside of the ultimate to get ultimates quicker, or maybe if your first fight on all ends, you can get back to it quickly thanks to how Phainon does work, especially again with DDD setups. So she's also a good option to help you get a setup to make it to where you can get your ult quickly for the first time and also anytime after that. And her E1 increases the speed by 20% for a turn for the character you are buffing that has her Benediction buff, which comes from her skill, when you do use her ultimate on them, which is always going to be Phainon. So if you're doing a bit of a faster Phainon, or you have a certain setup and it can allow you to get to a breakpoint Phainon to get more turns technically, and even do a -1 setup out of that, it does enable for some setups outside of his ultimate. Her E4 also will increase the damage multiplier by the Benediction skill buff by 20%, so that's even more you can get. Another fantastic option with Phainon is actually RMC. Unfortunately, RMC inside Phainon's ult is going to remove all forms of sub-DPS capabilities they do have. But with the man buff, you are targeting Phainon, so she is actually able to give a charge to him. Will increase crit damage for everyone on the team at least, which also obviously does include Phainon, so more damage there. But after you do target Phainon, he gains Beb support, and he's going to have true damage for every instance of damage he does do in his ultimate, which is, as you guessed it, very good for his damage as it is true damage. So in his ultimate throughout the entire thing, he's going to have a significantly amplified ultimate. And RMC is also free, so you have access to the E1, which will now also increase his crit rate by 10% when using Mem support. So that allows you to consider more ways to actually build him with stacking more attack percent and crit damage on his build. And the last character I want to talk about, which is actually really good with him, and is really the only debuffer that does properly work with him, and that is Cypher. Unfortunately, in Phainon's ultimate, you're going to lose the ability to get any Cypher follow-up attacks, have Cypher use her skill, but it's mainly for the fact that she does actually increase the damage taken by all enemies when she is on the battlefield, which for some reason actually does count when she is departed. Even if it didn't work though, she does work for the main fact that you actually are able to gain tally for Cypher when you are in Phainon's ultimate attacking. So you go into Phainon's ult, you do all this damage, you exit it. If you're not able to kill and you're still maybe even in the first cycle, or you at least hit a good spot, you're going to have a bunch of tally ready for your Cypher, which is going to do probably 2, 3, 4 million extra damage after the ultimate ends. So she is actually one of the only sub DPS quote unquote that does work, as you are actually able to build her tally in Phainon's ultimate. So once you do exit the ultimate and he dispels it with this final hit, Cypher is going to be ready on standby with a bunch of tally built up, as long as your Phainon was doing good damage at least. And then you rip Cypher's ultimate, and that is probably going to kill the boss, because Cypher again does damage based off your main DPS doing more damage. So as long as you did good consistent damage, you're probably going to be able to decimate them with Cypher's ability. You're probably going to be able to decimate them with Cypher's ultimate, which is why she actually does work out pretty well with Phainon. And that does wrap up the Phainon teammate guide. Again, even though there are tiers, all these characters are workable with Phainon. A lot of them will go up in tiers when you do consider some of their early dupes. Sunday goes from the absolute best to the absolute best, especially with his E1, and it's not even close when you have the E1. Chibi can go all the way up to tier 1 when it comes to having her E1. Cypher can become even better to be considered when you have her E1, as it allows you to get even more tally. Robin's E1 can also jump her up a little bit because it does provide all-type res pen, and so on and so forth. So when you do factor in these limited characters' support eidolons that they do have earlier on, they can become even stronger, especially someone like Sparkle as well, who gets 24% total defense ignore with their E2. So again, support eidolons can practically change where they are being positioned. That's why this video mainly considers E0, S0, and also kind of S1 in mind. But I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, drop a like, would be greatly appreciated. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn the bell icon for future videos like this, along with all the types of Star Wars content. And I'll see you later. Peace out.